This
everyone for
conference
joining.
will now be recorded.
Thanks everyone for joining us. This is the first webinar in our June webinar series called Pivoting Revenue Streams Right Now and Re-Strategizing for the Future. My name is Leah Steele and I'm the Economic Development Coordinator for the City of Laurel. And we're the sponsor for this webinar and the series of webinars this month. Before we get started, I just want to share a few housekeeping notes. Please make sure that your microphones are muted so we can all hear our speaker. And then to view the speaker who's speaking currently, at the top of your screen, it'll say view everyone. If you click that and you scroll down, you can select who's talking, and that will show you the speaker who's currently talking space. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the chat box. It's a little word bubble on the right side of your screen. I'll be monitoring the chat for any questions. If you do click on the word bubble right now, I do have some information in there for you right now. And feel free to chat in there right now your business name or your industry that you're in or your business type. We'd love to see which type of businesses are participating in this webinar. As you heard before, we're going to be recording this webinar for future use. So it's going to be shared on our Facebook page, facebook.com/LaurelECD. You can view the whole recording there. It'll be posted hopefully later today or tomorrow. And to get started, I'd like to introduce our speaker. He's a local author with over 10 years experience helping small businesses and entrepreneurs. Farah Kami, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Leah. Welcome, everyone. There are certainly some challenging times for small business, so I want to thank the City of Laurel's Economic and Community Development Department for putting this together. Leah Steele, Economic Development Coordinator, and certainly want to thank you for your efforts in coordinating this. And of course, as I like to do with every presentation now, thank you for everyone who typically we don't think of it as essential worker, but because of the pandemic have certainly proved that very many people are essential to our way of life. I briefly want to talk about the seminar series. It's a three-part series specifically for the COVID-19 pandemic. The content is cumulative, so the next one and the one after that will build on the content presented on this site. And as Leah said, the presentation is being recorded and will be posted so you can watch it on demand at any time. Just a quick capture of the dates and what we're going to be talking about. Again, these are cumulative, so today we're talking about revenue streams, things you can do right now. Next lecture is going to be about small business and continuity planning. One of the things we've noticed is that a lot of small businesses don't have a continuity plan. So it's very important, especially now as it's been demonstrated, to have one. And then finally, this series will conclude with some marketing tips, specific marketing tips to reach customers during and after the pandemic. And sorry, I'll go back to that one. I specifically wanted to put the question, what would you like to see? So I know Leah always asks, and she's made a tremendous effort to contact small businesses in the Laurel area to see what types of information and content you like to see. So if you do want to see something, please contact Leah, or I'll give you my information at the end of this presentation, and you can reach out and we can try to design something specifically to that need. We'll begin with strategizing for the future. And the first thing I want to say up front is that this isn't the type of webinar where I sit here and say, here's what you need to do. It's going to be really easy. Just follow this advice. It's not going to be easy. Pretty challenging times. There are projections that, you know, the recovery may take 2 to 3 years. So keep that in mind. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but hopefully we can provide you some kind of plan or framework. And if you know me at all, you know I like checklists. So some type of checklist for you to follow to try to first survive, then recover, then hopefully thrive. Every re-strategizing for a business, and those who've done this before know, you need to begin with a good situational awareness and understanding of your current environment. Obviously, everyone knows the pandemic is going on, but you need to take a look at the technical aspects and specific things that are impacting your business. So typically for a strategy, we start with a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. However, for this particular instance, I wanted to kind of reverse the order to a TWS. So basically threats, weaknesses, strengths, and opportunities. And really, our goal with this exercise is to see what strengths and opportunities there are to address the weaknesses and threats we're facing. Let's talk about the threats that we're facing right now. There are basically four main threats to small business right now. One is the need for social distancing. This can include anything from stay-at-home orders, complete lockdowns, to staying apart 6 feet, 15 minutes, which basically limits our customers. And the reason I put 6 feet and 15 minutes is that is what the CDC considers contact. So if you're just passing by someone in an aisle or a shopping center or in the street, that's not considered contact. So 6 feet and 15 minutes. So you have to be within 6 feet of someone or others within that time frame and distance. So it's very important to understand that, because a lot of the laws that are coming out are considering that, limiting your square footage, how many people you can let in your store, where they can line up, how far apart they have to be. So obviously social distancing impacts our customers. We don't typically have the types of customers that we would have. People can't leave their homes. Another one, which is obvious, is the staff getting sick, the staff or ownership. Obviously that can limit operations temporarily or for a long term, or, it can even be tragic if you contract it and, don't have good results or aren't able to get over it. That could have permanent damages and changes. The third threat is the threat from the consumer confidence. So this is typically an economic term. It includes a lot, but how confident are consumers in the economy? How confident are they that they can spend money? We're seeing a lot of layoffs. Unemployment obviously has gone through the roof. We're seeing some companies do furloughs and lower pays for people to stay working. So getting paid less of it, essentially for doing the same amount of and the type of work. And obviously there's talks of this pandemic putting us into a recession, potentially having started from February. And we don't know how long that's going to last. So that is obviously a threat, consumer confidence. We need to deal with that. And then there is fear and anxiety all around. Outside of social distancing, consumer confidence, people getting sick, people may just be afraid to leave their homes, interacting with the public, going to stores and things like that, even as we move to phase 2 and 3 and hopefully finally recover. So all these threats we need to keep in mind, and you'll see these threats come up again and again as we discuss how we're going to try and mitigate some of these threats. As Leah mentioned, we asked that you tell us the types of businesses that you're in, and you can certainly contact me afterwards and get more specific advice. But I listed some general weaknesses for small businesses and small business entrepreneurs. Typically, low cash flow. The statistics that have come out recently are saying that the hardest small businesses that are being hit are the ones that have less than 20 employees. And of course, most small businesses have probably less than 5 employees. So typically a small business of that size, you don't have a huge profit margin every month to be putting towards contingency planning or saving. So low cash flow, that's what we're dealing with. That is a weakness of just about every small business. And then small businesses also typically have low access to credit. So again, the 20 employees or less comes into play, but typically small businesses don't have standing lines of credit with their banks. And the amount of capital that they can access is typically way less than a larger business. And that includes, how do they give you capital? It depends on your assets, what you can put up for collateral, things like that. And then, as we briefly mentioned with continuity planning, small businesses typically don't have robust, formal, in-depth continuity of operations planning. which is very important, which is we'll talk about in one of the other series. But again, that's a common theme, backup planning, not necessarily something that's formalized. Small business strengths, there actually are some that will come in handy during these times. Small businesses are typically way more agile than large businesses, and several things play into that, like having a smaller staff. If you don't have to worry about 100 to 200 employees, your decision making is much more quicker, can be made more quickly. And then obviously there are usually only one or two decision makers. You don't have to go to a board to get a plan approved. You can basically make the decision yourself or with your one or two other partners. Another strength, a lot of small businesses were considered and are still considered essential businesses. So you may be in an essential business that has been able to stay open. And lastly, a lot of small businesses provide the wanted goods and services. So not only could you be essential, but what you're selling is actually very important and is needed even during the pandemic. And that brings us to opportunities. Believe it or not, there actually are some opportunities that are coming out. Some people believe out of chaos, there's often opportunity. So again, we're talking about the essential business. It might be a good time if you're not an essential business to take a look at the list of essential businesses and see if you can pivot to becoming an essential business. Another opportunity potentially that's already started to shift some decision making is that people are going to start to take a look at where they're buying, where their products and services are coming from, where they're made. And there was already somewhat of a movement. There's always been a Made in the USA movement, but now we actually have an example of how our supply chains can be disrupted. Whether we want to or not, whether we're friendly with other countries or not, diversifying our supply chain is going to be a necessity and not necessarily just something that we're going to talk about doing. And of course, opportunities, there are government assistance programs. There's the Paycheck Protection Program, small business disaster loans. Maryland had early on several grants that small businesses could take advantage of if they qualified. So those opportunities are around. And then one thing that every small business owner needs to do, especially during times of crisis, preferably you'd be doing it all the time, but you really do need to take a look at the goods and services that are popular, that are needed right now. You need to follow the trends. And so if you do some research, and this is going to be kind of important to consider the COVID-19 goods and services as we move through this presentation, there's some obvious things on there that you're not going to be surprised. People want sanitizers, masks, gloves, cleaning products, hygiene products. Some things that we've seen that have gone through the roof, frozen foods. We saw an immediate need, immediate uptake for frozen foods. Canned shelf-stable foods. Not only purchasing canned food or shelf-stable foods, but having the ability, it's becoming more popular now for people to buy food and can it themselves at home. People are kind of starting to realize that that could be something they need to invest in. So there is an opportunity there. Seeds and gardening equipment, those types of sales started increasing. Over-the-counter medicine, that's pretty obvious. One thing that has spiked while people are staying at home, CBD and alcohol sales. It's a type of entertainment or release, relaxation that people need. Entertainment and gaming, obviously video games, streaming services. YouTube has in certain countries, YouTube had to actually scale back their bandwidth, and Netflix and Amazon, because so many people were watching shows, so many more. Gaming, that doesn't include just video games, that includes puzzles, any types of games. So there may be an opportunity for a pivot there. One interesting thing that I've seen a lot of small businesses take advantage of, especially in the food service, is there's been a spike in things like chocolate chips, cocoa, and yeast, which means that people are baking more at home. And that'll come into, there's a great example of some small businesses providing baking kits to customers. Instead of buying cookies, they're selling cookie kits or pretzel kits for people to make at home for themselves. Fitness equipment and gear, there's an opportunity there because the gyms are shut down, limited, whatever, throughout the phases. People started buying all sorts of workout equipment so they can do so at home. Office products and equipment, obviously quite a large number of people started doing remote work who didn't necessarily have basically home offices already set up. So those people needed to catch up. There's an increased demand for remote connectivity equipment like WebEx, Zoom, Microsoft Teams. And then obviously we're all relying quite a lot on takeout and delivery services. And when we're talking about situational awareness, I also want to, kind of recap what happened from March to June and some of the issues that went into that. So obviously we started with a lockdown with the stay-at-home orders. Non-essential businesses were not permitted to open. And there was basically zero engagement outside of the home. So if you were interacting with consumers, you were doing so when they were at home. They weren't seeing street signs. They weren't running into people and getting referrals. We entered into phase one, and again, this is depending on where you live and where your business is located, but phase one, safer at home, more businesses open to the public, but obviously limited hours and access. And we're seeing more people start to come out. Some jurisdictions have moved into phase two, depending on where your business is. So we're lessening restrictions and there's more public interaction right now, and as we eventually go to three. Now, it's very important when you're talking about strategy to consider the resurgence. There is a big possibility of a resurgence in the fall. No one knows when it's going to be yet. We probably will know 2-3 weeks into it that there is an actual resurgence. So we may go back into a lockdown phase 1, 2, or 3. It's very important for small businesses to be prepared for this. The types of changes and ways you're thinking about stuff is going to have to be the way you think about it for 2 to 3 years to come until the recovery takes place. Okay, so let's take a look at where am I now? Where are you now? A small business likely fell into two categories. There's no other option. Basically, you're an essential business or a non-essential business. If you were an essential business, you stayed home through you stayed open through the lockdown, but you likely had reduced revenue. So it's very possible that you didn't have reduced revenue, but likely you did. You are starting to recover as an essential business, especially if you weren't limited with your customers. However, one of the big things you're going to deal with, if you're not already dealing with it now, is supply chain issues, because the impact of the pandemic is going to start, and we saw this already, but it's going to reverberate a little bit more with your supplies. So we are seeing slight less things available in grocery stores, or the raw materials, just because of transportation had slowed down, production had slowed down, manufacturing had slowed down. So we're still in that phase where we're going to see some supply chain disruptions, and certainly the cost of some raw materials go up. If you're a non-essential business, you basically had no customers or very limited customers. Your lack of revenue has caused existential problems. So by that, I mean the validity of the existence of your business is in question if you have had no revenue for 2 to 3 months, and if you didn't or were not able to take advantage of government programs like PPP or disaster loans. So that's where you fall into, likely essential business, non-essential business, and that's what we're facing. Again, as far as taking a snapshot of what's going on, I briefly wanted to mention the industries most and least impacted. One of the things about pivoting is whatever that's not impacted, that's where you want to possibly pivot to or try to support that industry. So obviously, everyone knows airlines have taken a big hit, casinos and gaming facilities again, big hit. And this includes industries that support the airlines or casinos. Leisure facilities, anything from, cinema to hotels or vacation homes, vacation rentals. Auto parts and equipment, there likely will be a rather quicker recovery for auto parts and equipment because people are not driving right now, but we likely will soon. And then obviously, if you follow the news, oil and gas has taken a big hit just because of the amount of supply that's not being used. Industries least effective, and this is not typically what I thought of when I was trying to figure out what was least affected, but I read reports that insurance companies, whether it's life, health, property casualty, not really impacted. Their sales have stayed consistent. And then obviously, for obvious reasons, healthcare and pharmaceuticals not very impacted because of the solutions they provide directly to the current situation. Small businesses. Small businesses, so we talked about the industries impacted, and here's some small businesses. You may fall into some of these, but these are small business types specifically that have been impacted. So hotels, any business that is tourism dependent. So all those businesses in DC that rely heavily on summer tourism season, spring and summer, they're going to take a hit. Obviously, movie theaters, cinema, plays, anything that required large gatherings of people, they're taking a big hit. Personal services, haircuts, estheticians, massage therapists, taking a big hit. Brick and mortar retail, we still have plenty of those. Obviously, for if customers can't get to you and browse through the shop, whether you're a small or large store, you're taking a hit. Gas stations, not only are we driving less, so we don't need as much gasoline, but we are not, a lot of gas stations have the mechanics. We're not, the wear and tear is reduced, and obviously the price of gas itself has gone down. Initially, construction companies were okay. But because of that consumer confidence aspect, we're seeing a lot of construction projects that were in the works being canceled. So that may be a bit of a lag in construction companies, especially the small ones, being impacted, but they're certainly going to start to be impacted. Obviously, restaurants and delis, a lot of walk-in traffic, and for some of our restaurants and delis locally, they've been able to take advantage of some of the digital solutions early on to generate some revenue. Manufacturing, obviously, that could come in with a lot of small business manufacturing or one of the small businesses that support manufacturing. When you can't have your factory workers, line workers standing next to each other producing products, that's going to slow things down. Farms, again, and this is something that is having impacts to this day. I read an article that fruit companies and farmers are now starting to see some more cases as far as infections. And then tech startups, they're actually taking a big hit. A lot of tech startups require on investment capital early on in the stages, and a lot of those venture capitalists are not as confident in providing tech startups right now more money to continue. So some of them have completely stopped, some of them have slowed down. As we come to kind of the end of thinking about our strategy, one very concrete thing you need to decide as a small business owner or entrepreneur is, where do I need to be? And the way you have to answer this question is numerically in dollars. Where do you need to be to survive? So basically, taking what minimum revenue and minimum expenses can you operate with to arrive at a minimum profit that you can handle, not just to keep your business open, but to survive personally yourself for your personal expenses. You actually need to know this number. It's very important to know how much you need to make, what your expenses are going to be. This is the bare minimum. This is the stage for survival that we're just going to hope to survive and enter the recovery phase. For the recovery number, you can take a look at what your numbers were like before the pandemic began. So if you were just making up a number, $1,000 a month, if that was the norm, then we can use that for a recovery number. And then obviously, try to reduce expenses. But that's going to be the gauge of where, okay, we're exiting survival mode and we're entering into our personal recovery stage. And then it might also be a good time, if you haven't been thinking about it before the pandemic, what's your goal profit? What is the stage where you can say, okay, I've ended recovery, but I'm now thriving because of the decisions I made. So those things, you don't just create a picture of hey, I want to have 3 stores. I want to have 1 store with 5 employees. You need to have very specific minimum numbers so you know how you're progressing through your stages. Let's talk about pivoting revenue streams now with some more specific examples and advice. When we're talking about the revenue stream, we're gonna consider February, which what economists are predicting that when the recession started, to December, and then beyond that as well. So we're not just thinking right now, we're thinking right now and then possibly 2 to 3 years. And this again comes into continuity planning. We talked about the threats. Now let's talk about how to overcome some of those threats. Obviously, we were talking about social distancing, the fact that there may be lockdowns or 6 feet apart, limited square footage allowed to be used, 1 person for 100 square feet in your store or in your office or your location. Consumer confidence, we need to deal with that. And then obviously the fear and anxiety. So the first step absolutely is, before we even start to address those, is don't give your customers a reason not to come. Make sure your customers know you're open. You can say, hey, we're open. We're open. We know you're hurting. We're hurting. Make sure your customers know you're open, and then ask them to support you. Early on in the pandemic, probably a week into it, I had to go to College Park and no one was around, but I saw something really clever and good. There was a big sign on, I think it was a bagel shop and a deli. It said, we're open during the pandemic, please support local small business. Just because of that sign, I decided I was going to support them. Otherwise, customers may actually not know that you're open. A personal example, since I wear a lot of suits, I depend heavily on dry cleaning. I do not know if the dry cleaner that I use is open, even though they were considered an essential business initially. No one ever texted me to say we're open. Their website doesn't say they're open. I haven't called them. I didn't want to take that, but there are some marketing things you can do to just let your customers know that you're open, whether it's just signage or what. Make sure your customers know that you're taking precautions to protect them, customers. So say it as often as possible. Every McDonald's chain right now has a sign. It says everything they do every morning to their employees, with the employees, to make sure everything is clean and eventually the customers are going to be safe. So make sure you say this on your website. Make sure you say it in email format. Make sure you say it in your newsletters, Yelp, Google, door signage, window signage, as much as possible. We're open and we're taking these precautions to make sure. Advertising, interviews, and then one thing that is not necessarily listed here, but a lot of small businesses can take advantage of what is called bulk voice or bulk text messaging. And it's completely legal. People can opt out if they like, but if you have a list of numbers for your customers or emails, you can let them know that you're open. If they don't want to get those texts, they'll just unsubscribe. It's very easy. But to a lot of people, if I visited my dry cleaners and I got an automatic text that said they were open, I would still be using them. And here's how you can reach So tell your customers, here's how you can reach us and still socially distance. Customers need to know this, that you're not just open, not that just so you're taking precautions, but how can they purchase stuff from you? Online ordering, phone ordering, curbside pickup, delivery, mailing, limited customers, whether you're going to allow limited customers in store, depending on the jurisdiction you're in and the location. So make sure they know you're open. That is the absolute first step, because not everybody knows. If you're currently not an essential business, you should think about whether you are able to become one. The list of essential businesses is basically determined by the Department of Homeland Security. There are 16 critical infrastructure sectors, and if you remember seeing the governor's order initially, it kind of mirrored those 16 critical infrastructure sectors, and we'll go through those just quickly, but that can be found online as well. But can I pivot to be essential? For the future, can there be a pivot to provide services under the business and sectors considered essential? So you might take a look at that and see that you can actually pivot your business to become, just by making a few changes, to become essential. So some of the essential businesses, I don't want to take too much time on this, just to leave as much question period time. But the chemical sector, obviously pharmaceuticals and manufacturing, commercial facilities, lodging, landscaping, janitorial, all the trades, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, home improvement supplies, laundromats, dry cleaners, construction companies, self-storage. A lot of self-storage places are small businesses. Those were all allowed to stay open. Energy, electrical, gas station, utilities, communications, not many small business TV or radio stations, but phone, internet, suppliers. Food and agri, obviously, we needed grocery stores, convenience stores to stay open. A lot of the alcohol distribution and liquor stores, they're doing pretty well as long as they don't have supply interruptions. Wineries, farms, pet supplies, veterinary shops, they were all allowed to stay open. Healthcare, for obvious reasons. I'm not going to read through that list, but healthcare was critical. IT companies, they were allowed to stay open to support remote working. So software, hardware engineers, networking engineers, anything that you could have to provide it. Transportation, obviously, we're seeing a huge demand now for courier and delivery services. Auto stores, they were allowed to stay open. Of course, airlines, the ports, railroads, cruise ships, they're taking a big hit. But then supporting firms, so staffing firms, payroll companies, things like that. And then I don't think any of these necessarily relate to small businesses, but water, wastewater, government, manufacturing, defense, and emergency services were all sectors that were permitted to stay open. So how do we overcome social distancing? Some specific ideas, 6 in particular. One thing you can do to overcome that social distancing threat and barrier is to go mobile. And by that, I mean the services you offered previously have to be distributed and delivered differently now. So let's use the laundromat as an example. If people do not feel comfortable leaving their house and your business is taking a hit, you need to pivot to providing mobile services. So instead of people bringing you their laundry, you can go pick it up. It requires probably 1 or 2 people in a regular car or van. You may already have access to that. People can just leave that dry cleaning out in front of their house, just like Amazon and all the food deliveries are doing. You can pick it up, again, return it back when it's done. Laundered, dry cleaned, no contact. So that type of thing you need to think about. How can I provide the services and products I offered, but mobile? The other thing to consider, the old good old-fashioned telephone, go telephonic. You might, never consider taking orders via phone or providing consultations over phone. Maybe it was all done in person or at your customer's home. but now you might have to pivot to phone or having, Microsoft Teams meetings, web chats, video chats, things like that. So advice and going telephonic will actually kind of mix with some of the other solutions that you can combine. So you could be going mobile, using trucks or bikes or mail or whatever, but you can still be, increasing your engagement with customers, letting them call you more often, asking questions. Again, small businesses, they're agile. You can be more nimble than large businesses. So going nimble is very important. That includes several different things. Cross-selling to promote your products and services. One thing you can do is you can start to sell masks. You can start to sell sanitizer. If people see masks, if they're walking into a dry cleaner, if the price is right, very likely to purchase it. If you see sanitizer, you can do the homemade sanitizer. These are just small items that you can add on to and cross-sell with what you're selling right now. Repackaging existing products and services. So one good example of that is if you're a pizza shop, instead of selling pizza cooked with all the toppings, you can make pre-made pizzas that people can just pop into the oven whenever they want. So they may actually turn to you for not just that meal or dinner for that particular Friday night, but buy 2 or 3 of those and be able to, use that for lunch or dinner another day or another night. The other thing is very important as far as being nimble to keep flexible hours of operations. Again, this is going to be hard, but a lot of small businesses and large ones as well are setting specific times for, let's say, first responders or health workers, so they can just be, using the store or whatever facility you have for certain hours. And then for senior citizens who are at higher risk, setting 1 or 2 hours just exclusively for them. And then, maybe families, you can extend your hours through the evening or make things by appointment if they fall into certain categories. So very important to stay nimble in that way. Again, more stuff for overcoming social distancing threats. If you have not already been online, if your business doesn't have an online presence, I would say that it is absolutely essential for you to have an online presence. If you don't have a website, you should have a website as quickly as possible. If you sell products or services that can be on Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever, they need to be. You need to find the most popular online venues for selling your products and services, and you need to concentrate on having a presence there. Another aspect of going online is using phone apps. So getting on the platforms on Android and Apple phones. So these include Instacart, Uber Eats, DoorDash, Grubhub, Postmates, all sorts of different apps, because that is how people are engaging with businesses right now. If we go back into, hopefully we never do again, but if we go back into a lockdown, the phone is going to be the primary way people are searching for you. Which brings me to the next solution, is going digital. So this includes the web and those phones. If you didn't do online advertising or phone app advertising before, it's time to start. You need to use the tools that platforms like Google provide to figure out what keywords people are searching in your area, and you can do that very easily, and that's a free tool. And customize your website to that, customize your deals, your promotions, everything to that. And you need to actually, as much as possible, and I know it's going to be difficult, but you need to invest in advertising on those. YouTube can be a better advertising source to provide your expertise and to advertise what you're selling, just because it's a free source for you to initially start with, and possibly use some of your revenue for things like cost per click ad or keyword searches to augment how you're showing up on search engines. Overcoming consumer confidence, which as you remember was one of the major threats. When you engage with your customers, make sure you're telling your stories. Make sure you're being honest and you're saying, hey, we're a small business, local, and we're hurting. We know you are too. We're in it together. Please support us. We're, again, that message, we're open. Please support local small business. One very important thing, make sure to contact TV, radio, newspapers, and economic development councils. At the beginning of the presentation, Leah said she wants to hear from local small businesses. Economic development councils like the city of Laurels and Prince George's counties and all the other surrounding counties, they want to hear if you're open. I get Arlington counties emails, and they've made a very concerted effort to make sure everyone on that mailing list knows what types of businesses are open. So it's very important to reach out. These people do actually want to hear from you. There's been all sorts of TV and radio stories on who's remained open and what challenges they're facing. Very early on, there was a story about a local Laurel business, actually, that provided pet sitting services, and they were able to be interviewed on one of the major TV stations, and that video they were able to share. And some people, because they knew they were a small, basically they weren't generating enough revenue because everyone was at home, they didn't need their pets taken care of. But as soon as that story went viral, and this is a local business, people started, their customers acknowledged that they were hurting and they needed some revenue. So they started, buying gift cards in advance. So, let's say $100 gift card for future pet sitting services. So that helped that business initially early on and gave them a lot of publicity for people who may actually be using that type of service. So don't think just because you're a small business, TV, radio, newspaper, the media doesn't care, or even government. You have to kind of think like you're a big business. What would a big business do in this situation? They would approach TV, radio, newspaper. Those are all free advertising. Again, when it comes to consumer confidence, and a lot of small business owners who are currently in business went through the Great Recession that started in 2008, 2009. So you're well aware that when we have economic downturns, you need to give customers deals. The same old way of selling things is not going to fly. So give customers deals, provide family sizes. So if you're a restaurant, instead of just selling pizza and then wings separately, another local small business, I believe it's BJ's Brew House, they do family sizes now. They didn't do that before. So you can basically get more food for less for the whole family. And as we know, families are staying home together these days. And then obviously reduce prices. Whatever your product or service is, you need to give people discounts, maybe bulk discounts, whatever you can do. The other thing to overcome consumer confidence, and again, this is pretty standard for economic downturns and recessions. If you are able to, and if your product or service qualifies for this, provide financing or credit. There are companies that specialize in this to provide financing options for small businesses. So if you have a home improvement business, flooring, windows, roofing, whatever, they will provide, if obviously you can't do it for, dry cleaning to provide financing because the dollars don't make sense, but $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 or more dollar purchases certainly qualify for financing. So you need to search for the types of companies that give you that type of service to provide to your customers. And then credit, very important thing. If you're a cash only business, it is not a good time to be a cash only business. One, people are not going to have as much cash on hand. So cash and check. You might see people shy away from spending what they are considering to be emergency funds right now. So if you don't take credit cards, it's a very good idea to start taking credit cards right now. One of the final weaknesses and threats to small business currently, the fear and anxiety. And a lot of the steps we've talked about previously, you can mitigate some of this fear and anxiety. But When it comes to addressing customer fear anxiety, it actually starts with your employees, your own staff, or yourself if you're the only person in the company. It's critically important to advertise and list the steps taken to protect employees. Employees have to be protected and educated on prevention, not just for their own health, but with their interaction with customers. So if I don't feel safe with the way a retail store is doing business, and I have the choice of going somewhere else where I know what steps they're taking with their employees to make sure they're educated and know about social distancing, and you're doing temperature checks in the morning, then I'm likely to pick that business instead of the company that even may do it, but I don't know about. And then reassure customers. Again, it's critically important to advertise those lists of steps you take to protect employees and then to protect customers separately. So that, making sure you have signs posted of how many people are allowed in your store or in your facility. Making sure you mark the floor on where people are allowed to stand and can stand to be safe. Those are going to be important probably for the next year, because it doesn't look like we're out of the woods, and people are now starting to think about this type of stuff on a daily basis. Wanted to mention some specific examples kind of to bring everything together that we've been talking about. Throughout the pandemic, I saw a lot of examples, local and national restaurants, where they were kind of pivoting their revenue streams, not just selling, the sandwiches. And I believe Potbelly was one of the companies that did this early on. They weren't just selling sandwiches or snacks or food. They were actually putting their flour, their deli meats, their veggies, they're kind of treating their business as a pantry as well. In case you couldn't find something at a grocery store, or I actually heard that some of these businesses had better prices for deli meats than grocery stores. Obviously, you may have an advantage with your supply chain on the amount of stuff you're buying. Maybe you're not using it and you can afford to sell it. Yeast, flour, at some point, those things were in short supply because everyone was buying them. So that is an opportunity to pivot, and it has been done. Restaurants getting on delivery apps. Obviously, this was essential to do. Very likely people were not as comfortable picking up the food as they were getting it delivered. There are certainly challenges with the percentage that these delivery apps charge. I think as they get to start to get challenged a little bit more, you'll see some of those percentages possibly drop, and you could possibly also, negotiate. And depending on the app, bring that percentage that you have to pay down. But that's not just for restaurants. All types of businesses could have that types of delivery and delivery app. Another example that I'm seeing constantly, yoga and personal training sessions being offered online. Your business may be able to provide this service online. So, you can schedule and pay for yoga sessions, and the instructor either one-on-one, or, there might be several people on a Zoom call or a WebEx call, and they may be, it's working for them. This is likely not a replacement for a recovery, but it contributes to the survival mode. Same thing with personal training sessions, one-on-one interaction, certainly at the beginning of the lockdown, and then now a little bit more, but still, people are very cognizant of it. You can't go to the gym anytime you want with your personal trainer. They can't come over and give you personal training, so it may have to be done over video. Ordering online or ordering via phone. So let's say Lowe's in Laurel and Home Depot, they started doing this rather quickly, where you could purchase online or over the phone, and you would pull up your car, you would tell them what kind of car, and they would come and basically put what you purchased on the curbside. They would put it in your car for you. Depending on the types of services and products you provide, likely more product, but you can certainly take advantage of this as long as you advertise it, as long as you tell people, as long as your e-commerce is working properly on your website. People are way more likely to support small businesses right now because they know of the challenges. So small businesses, again, think like big businesses and offer curbside pickup for orders placed over phone or online. And then, early on, again, we saw a lot of businesses pivot their operations to making masks, sanitizers, and things like that. So breweries, they were a good example. They started making sanitizers using the existing equipment they had. They had to modify some stuff. A lot of businesses are just making masks on the side. I personally don't think that you could have a minimum number of masks on hand just because they're just useful. You can use them after the pandemic as well. But it's quickly becoming a way of life, and it's going to become an accessory soon, a fashion statement, different types of masks. And then we talked about this a little bit, but offering do-it-yourself kits. So I gave the pizza example. I know Auntie Anne's and another bakery type store were offering make-it-yourself pretzels and cookies. They sell the kits, you have it delivered to you, or you pick it up, and they would basically, spend the time with your family making it. So it serves several different ways to, offer up this repackaging. It's entertainment, it keeps the kids busy, and, it's a delicious snack that you can certainly enjoy after. As we kind of come to the end and close up just a little bit, I just want to go over the SWOT and the TWSO analysis. It's very important for you to do this and be honest with yourself when you're doing it. You can certainly, reuse the weaknesses and threats, but you can make them more specific as well to your industry, to the types of business, what specific threats, weaknesses, strengths, and opportunities that you have and see. Very important to do this. And then as far as threats, again, I just wanted to put this screen up, social distancing, consumer confidence, fear and anxiety, and then staff getting sick. So those are the things you need to concentrate on. Be very cognizant of. Every marketing, sales decision you make from this point on has to consider these threats and how consumers are going to react and how you're going to address. That's basically it. I like to try and keep these short. Just here I put the ways you can reach me. If you wanted to have some specific examples, if you have a mechanic shop and you wanted to talk about something and run something by me specifically for that. I am on LinkedIn. If you just search Bear Afghani LinkedIn, I should show up. That's the link. You can certainly email me, bear@sunnymedia.com. And then on Amazon, if you search for The Startup King, my book will pop up. And maybe you can learn, a few things from that as well. Leah, back to you.
Bear, I want to thank you so much for taking this time to be with us. You definitely given all the businesses a lot to think about. And I think the way that you laid it out is very digestible for the businesses, especially when you're thinking about so many things at this point. So like I said, this webinar is going to be recorded, so everyone is going to be able to view it over and over. And I just want to also thank Mayor Craig Mo for being here on the webinar today. We really appreciate your support and showing up. And I know all of our small businesses appreciate you too. So thank you so much. I also want to thank Brooke, who is part of the Department of Economic and Community Development as well, for helping me coordinate this webinar. This is the first webinar in our series. So thank you, Brooke. And thank you everyone for attending. I hope you got a lot out of this. Bear is going to be back with us for a few more webinars this month, Thursday, June 18th for the continuity plan, and also Thursday, June 25th on marketing. And those are both with Bear at 2 p.m. So we'll share those links on Facebook and Eventbrite. So thank you so much again, and everyone have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.